We're going to start with the ancient era and work our way to the modern era. The ancient era. Invented in ancient Greece around the 6th century BC by Perelos of Athens, the brazen bull was primarily reserved for political dissidents, rebels, and those guilty of religious sacrilege. The process began by forcing the condemned individual inside a hollow, life-sized brass statue of a bull, which was then securely locked from the outside. A massive bonfire was stoked directly beneath the statue's belly, causing the metal to heat to incredibly high temperatures. As the victim inside roasted to death, their desperate screams passed through an internal system of pipes and reeds built into the bull's snout, converting them into the deep, realistic roaring of a bull, which would serve as entertainment for onlookers. Death on average would take 10 to 30 minutes, and victims would die from toxic inhalation or just the sheer heat. Another form of punishment used in ancient times that's equally, if not worse, is impalement. Impalement was used as a ruthless instrument of psychological warfare. The process involved laying the victim face down while executioners drove a massive, sharpened wooden spike horizontally through the abdomen, just beneath the ribcage. Unlike later European variants that pierced the body vertically, the Assyrian technique intentionally avoided the heart, lungs, and major arteries to maximize suffering. The stake was then hoisted vertically and planted firmly in the ground, tilting the victim forward. Suspended high outside their own besieged city walls, victims would hang in the blistering desert for days before dying. The Dark Ages. Originating in the ancient Persian Empire, Scaphism was a state execution reserved for high traitors and political conspirators. The process began by stripping the victim naked and securing them tightly between two identical, hollowed-out wooden boats fastened together so that only their head, hands, and feet protruded. The executioners then force-fed the victim massive quantities of milk and honey, continuing until the individual developed severe, uncontrollable diarrhea. Honey was also smeared entirely over the victim's exposed face and limbs to attract insects. Left floating on a stagnant pond or exposed to the baking sun, the victim's trapped waste quickly became a breeding ground for wasps, flies, and flesh-eating maggots. Over the course of several agonizing weeks, these insects slowly devoured the victim's flesh from the outside in, eventually causing death. Another form of punishment used in the Dark Ages that I need to mention is the oubliette. This punishment was utilized across early Dark Age European fortresses and castles. The word oubliette comes from the French translation meaning to forget. They were constructed as a deep, specialized underground stone pit, accessible only via a narrow trapdoor at the very top of a high ceiling. The room was intentionally cramped, preventing the prisoner from standing upright or lying down fully. Left completely in the dark, the individual lived out their final days in total isolation, surrounded by their own accumulating waste and the skeletal remains of past captives, until they eventually succumb to dehydration, starvation, or disease. Medieval era. Widely utilized across medieval Europe by both secular authorities and religious tribunals, the rack was an interrogation tool. The process took place on a large rectangular wooden frame raised slightly off the floor. The victim was forced onto their back, and their wrists and ankles were tightly bound to heavy rollers positioned at opposite ends of the mechanism. As the interrogation commenced, the executioner used a ratcheting lever or steering wheel to slowly turn the rollers in opposite directions. This applied continuous, excruciating tension to the limbs. The mechanical pull gradually stretched the victim's body until muscles, ligaments, and tendons tore apart, ultimately culminating in the loud, agonizing dislocation of the shoulders, hips, elbows, and knees. Another form of punishment that was used is flaying. The overall process was a highly methodical execution where the victim was stripped naked and bound tightly to a wooden frame. Using specialized, razor-sharp curved knives, the executioner systematically peeled the skin away from the living muscle tissue in large, intact sheets. The process typically began at the head or face and worked downward, with executioners making sure the victim was conscious for as long as possible. They were left exposed, ultimately dying hours or days later from a combination of massive systemic infection or sheer circulatory shock. Early modern period. Hanged, drawn, and quartered. The multi-stage process began with the condemned being drawn, meaning they were tied to a wooden hurdle, and dragged by horses through the streets to the gallows. Next, they were hanged by the neck, but cut down right before losing consciousness. While fully awake, the executioner systematically pulled out their intestines and vital organs, burning them on a brazier directly in front of the dying victim's face. Finally, the victim was decapitated, and their remaining torso was chopped into 4 distinct sections. These body pieces were even sent to be publicly displayed on spikes across the city. The Industrial Era. Widely utilized in the post-Civil War American South, the sweatbox was a disciplinary punishment used in prison camps and on southern plantations. The process involved locking a single prisoner inside a narrow, unventilated vertical box constructed entirely out of wood or corrugated iron. The box was deliberately placed in wide-open clearings under the direct, blistering summer sun. As the metal or wood absorbed the solar radiation, internal temperatures quickly soared past 120 degrees. Trapped inside the dark, suffocating chamber without water or air circulation, the prisoner experienced rapid, extreme dehydration and severe heat stroke within hours, often resulting in organ failure or permanent brain damage if left for more than a single day. Modern era. White torture. White torture is a psychological interrogation method. The overall process targets the human nervous system through total sensory deprivation, rather than physical blows. The detainee is locked inside a cell where every single surface is painted a stark, sterile white. The room is soundproofed against all external noise and kept under blinding, 24-hour artificial fluorescent lighting. The prisoner is forced to wear a white uniform, white shoes, and is served only white food, such as unseasoned white rice, on white plates by guards who wear padded shoes and never speak. Within days, the absolute lack of sensory stimuli causes the brain to induce severe hallucinations, total psychiatric collapse, and permanent cognitive damage.